Hey, everybody. Welcome to the very first episode of Core Components. I'm your host, Sierra Stoltz, and our guest for this first conversation is Scot Wingo. Scot is a serial founder here in the Triangle region of North Carolina, and his first startup is actually what brought together the group of folks who eventually founded the software company I'm with, which is Syncfusion. I had never met Scot before this conversation, but I, along with everybody who pays any attention at all to the local startup scene, had certainly heard of him. Scot has already had several successful exits in the rearview mirror. He's got 2 companies sold, another taken public. He's seen a lot of action. And while some might rest on those laurels, Scot is not slowing down. Quite the opposite, actually. The day we spoke, he was on the cusp of tipping off the first round of Tweener Madness, which is a bracket-style competition put on by the hyperlocal investment fund that he's a general partner in. And so the contest, which is being chronicled on one of Scot's 2 podcasts, gives 8 early-stage startups a crack at $25,000 that they can use to level up their game, so to speak. I do love a good stretch metaphor. Scot then rolled straight on into launching his next venture, which is Refi Buy. In addition to having a super catchy name, it looks to leverage agentic technology to solve some of e-commerce's toughest problems, something Scot actually has a good deal of experience with. And when I say that all this happened in rapid succession, I mean that it was in the span of a touch more than a week or so. Basically, Scot is a busy, busy man, and so I cannot say how excited I am that he took the time to talk with me for this very first episode of Core Components. In our conversation, we'll look at Scot's journey from investee to investor, how he's navigated several waves of technological change over the years, and also a couple of Black Swan events. Along the way, we'll have a few laughs and also get a couple of recommendations from a man who clearly knows what he's talking about when it comes to bringing great ideas to fruition. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate you taking the time, and I'm looking forward to having you back for the next episode of Core Components. All right, enjoy, and we'll kick this off now. Thank you so much, Scot Wingo. We are here with Scot today. It is early March as we're speaking, and this is the inaugural episode of Core Components. We're going to be looking at the individuals, environments, strategies, systems, and innovations that fuel results, and just what makes organizations go forward. And Scot has an enormous amount of experience in that on many occasions, many companies. He's a serial founder here in the Triangle. He started Stingray, which my company has a lot of connections with. Syncfusion is the company that I'm with, as we mentioned in the intro. And then he moved on to Auction Rover. Was that correct order? Stingray, yep. Auction Rover, ChannelAdvisor, Spiffy. There's just so many to keep track of. And now with the Triangle Tweener Fund. And so we're going to be discussing just a little bit of that today. So Scot, why don't you take it away for just a moment? Tell us just a bit about your background, and we can jump into kind of the present day.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Sarah. It's good to be on the inaugural episode, so I appreciate that. We'll set the bar super high, so all guests future guests have to jump over it. Yeah, so I'm from South Carolina, a little town called Aiken, which is a very small town, and then went to University of South Carolina to do computer engineering. Thought I wanted to do hardware and ended up being better at software. And then came to the Triangle area for NC State and got a master's in computer engineering, again with kind of a software focus. Left the area for a couple of years. The only job I could find out of school was up in Connecticut and at a startup, and realized I loved startups, but not cold weather. So moved back down to the Triangle, and in '95 started Stingray Software, where a couple of the founders of your company worked for us. So Stefan Honig and Daniel.
Indeed.
And yeah.
Taking turns as CEO now. So you, by extension, have made a big difference by introducing the group of people that made a big difference to me.
Yeah, in early days of Stingray, the idea was core components, right? So we didn't call it that. This was before open sourcing and all the other stuff. But this ability to sell people things that would extend in the dev world what they were already doing. In that example, we had C++ components for Microsoft Foundation classes. Mm-hmm. So your founders and team have taken the ball and really run with that. So it's been neat to watch them build over the years.
Yeah, it's been exciting. I mean, I joined when it was, I don't know, somewhere in the 10 to 15 range, kind of in the pre-tweener in your terms stage. And now I think we have officially graduated. So it's been really exciting. And I know that, your openness and availability to Stefan and Daniel over the years, I know they've appreciated that. So
Thank you again for being on here with us today. So after, I guess, talking just a little bit about the progression, you had an exit with Stingray, and then what happened from there?
Yeah, so Stingray was interesting. It was bootstrapped, and it was myself and two other founders. And we had this idea. Being developers, we thought we want to start a company, and we don't know hardly anything about anything except we do know developers. So, so we figured that's the one demographic we know. And then what I discovered very quickly is it's very easy to market to developers. And I don't know if you're on the marketing team, but sure, you probably know this. But for developers, it's a simple recipe with two ingredients. Number one, pizza, and then number two, beer. So right now I'm in a good spot for this. I'm in a co-working facility. We could put beer and pizza out there, and 800 developers would flock like pigeons, and then we could sell to them. So that was basically our budget. We had a $5,000 beer and pizza budget, and we blew through that pretty quick. So, but that was good. I tried to raise venture capital and couldn't really figure it out. But then ultimately was able to sell the company. At that point, we got to where we had maxed out the addressable market, and it was a good time to sell. Also, the internet was starting to happen, and I started to get. I love these waves of change that we go through, and try to embrace them and lean into them, and figure out how can you build something on this new thing. At that point, it was the internet, and so after selling the company, I had this deadly combination of I'm a big Star Wars fan / geek, whatever you want to call me. So I had some liquidity from selling a business, and the Phantom Menace, which is episode 1, was coming out, which is where they did the prequel series.
I worked at a movie theater when that came out.
Ah, yes. Oh, I was one of those nuts camping out. Yeah.
A big day.
I was the guy dressed like a Jedi, and
I love it.
And yeah, so I started collecting more and more Star Wars stuff. And in the early days, I'm always very busy, and I don't have time to go around the world to these conventions like a lot of people do. So I was a big fan of e-commerce, and the early days of e-commerce, there was more auction sites than fixed price sites. So if I wanted to buy a certain collectible, I would have to have a little scheme where I'd find it on a number of websites, and then try to buy it for the price I wanted. Lose, win, stop kind of a thing. So started a company around that where we had a search engine. So it was called Auction Rover, and meaning you would like search different auction sites. It would bid on your behalf, and then you could sell across auction sites too if you wanted to. Because once you start buying a lot online, then to fuel your frenzy, you have to kind of start selling as well. So a lot of people kind of go through that, especially in the collectible category. They become sellers over time. And so that was the general idea of that one. It was kind of the opposite of Stingray, and that Stingray, we had revenue day one, we knew our customer, and we just grew revenue and were profitable very quickly. And we tried to raise VC, but we didn't necessarily need it. And then, so I think that's like you guys, to my understanding, you guys haven't raised a lot of outside capital or anything. So, yeah.
Yeah, correct. So, I know that's not as common maybe nowadays, but it depends on the product. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. Bootstrapping is what we call it. But this one was the opposite. So things happened so fast, and we just wanted to build this thing because there was this .com boom. And, so we raised $3 million of venture capital, which was pretty exciting. I'd never done that before. And then we grew the team very quickly. And before you knew it, we were acquired. We launched the product, but before we could make any revenue, we were acquired.
Wow.
But that was good because like 2 or 3 months later, the bottom dropped out of it, the .com bomb, or the bubble burst. So we kind of like rode it to the very top and got out, and then it kind of crashed. And that's kind of like what led to ChannelAdvisor, but I'll stop and see if you have any questions there.
Yeah, I was just curious. So during those early days, were you kind of going out and pitching, or were people coming to you? And what was your pitching experience like? I know that we'll talk a little bit later about pitching when we get to the Tweener Madness, but I was curious, like in your first go round at it, like how did that go for you, or what were your thoughts after?
Yeah, it was so weird because, at Stingray, I had pitched and I was really working on it, and I could never get anyone they would meet with me, but I couldn't get anyone to invest. And I didn't really understand their feedback. I couldn't really even, so they would say things like, this is a great idea and you're doing awesome, but the worst thing I could do is give you money. Like, I didn't understand that part. This day, I kind of still don't understand it. Local investors are nice, but sometimes you can be too nice. Like, you kind of need to give the entrepreneur some feedback.
They might soft pedal the feedback.
Yeah, I was getting no feedback. And other times they'd be like, this is a great idea, but every investment we make has to return our fund. And this one just doesn't meet that bar. Now, in hindsight, I think what they were trying to tell me was the addressable market was too small. But because it was developers, right? And there weren't that many developers in 1995. But in a way that's kind of ridiculous because now there's like a trillion developers, like everyone's a developer. So I don't know. Anyway, we can spend a lot of time on that. I didn't understand that feedback. And then here it was so ridiculous. I actually didn't have a pitch deck. Once we launched our site, and this wasn't really our intent, people loved it so much they would call and want to fly in to meet us, and so we would take those meetings. And yeah, so that's how we raised a check, is basically folks kind of finding us, and then I would pitch but without a deck, and basically say, well, here's what we're building, and then they would say, how are you gonna make money? I was like, well, we honestly don't know. We're just gonna go build this great product and figure it out. And they're like, okay. So it's kind of like at that point, I think a blind squirrel could have raised, so part of it was not me. It was the fact that, it's just like a great time to be raising capital. And then, e-commerce, like we just happened to be at the right time, at the right place with doing something in e-commerce, because everyone wanted to bet on it, but no one liked this boring bookstore called Amazon. And then everyone, eBay was very popular with VCs, but it was kind of a step ahead. So everyone liked what we were doing.
With ChannelAdvisor, I know that we were right across the hall from you for a good long time. And one thing that really struck me when I was looking at your career and kind of just the trajectory of it is that you've done so many different things, kind of like you've done selling to developers, selling to, kind of small, like you've done a lot of different markets. When we get to Spiffy, that's more of a direct to consumer. And I was just really interested on how, I feel like a lot of times people will do kind of one sort of thing that they get really good at. And it seems like you've been able to kind of succeed in a kind of a good cross section, a healthy cross section of kind of markets and ways you're approaching the customer.
Yeah, I would say every time I start a company, I'm trying to push myself to do something different and bigger. So, the whole point of doing this for me, at that point, I could have been done, but I was like 31 or 32. So, that's a weird.
Lots of energy.
Yeah. And, I've got kids and stuff, and I thought a lot about you just can't just retire when you're 32. Like, that's ridiculous. And, you don't want your kids to think you're some kind of a freeloader and that kind of whole thing. So I wanted them to understand work ethic and all. And for me, it's not the money, it's the building this kind of like what you guys have done. You take an idea and you get a lot of smart people together and you face a lot of adversity and you battle through that and you course correct. And suddenly you've built a business out of literally nothing. The fun thing about software is we take these non-physical things like ideas and we put them into people that have IQ and smarts and figure stuff out. And then out comes money. And, it's kind of a crazy thing. But the fun part about it is when a team comes together and executes and it seems impossible, but you do it, that's what's fun for me, is like that building process of solving really hard problems as a group of folks that trust each other and build something together. There's nothing better to me than doing that. It's like the one thing I am good at. So I've got to stick to it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the case of Syncfusion, it's been really, I've worked here for over 2 decades now, but I tell people that it's been more like working at maybe 5 different companies because there's so many different stages. The products morph in so many different ways. All of a sudden, there's an entirely new sort of product line. And so it's been really an exciting place to be. You've had a very different path, a lot more variety, I guess, but it's really, I don't know, it said something to me that all these different types of markets, it's an unusual thing. And so you got to ChannelAdvisor. So then what happened?
Yeah, so we had just sold Auction Rover, and then the .com bubble burst, and all the auction sites went out of business except eBay. Also, a very strange thing happened in that there was yet another craze after the .com bubble was the Beanie Baby bubble. So there's these little bags of sand, and people went crazy over them. And so we had, just to refresh your memory, we had a search engine that you didn't need if you had eBay. You just search eBay. We had a bidding agent that you didn't need. And then we had a selling tool for cross-auction sites. And it turned out it seems like you wouldn't need that, but it was really built kind of to be more advanced. It had its own little inventory system and stuff. And the eBay tools got ridiculously simple. So if you did any volume on eBay, their tools were useless to you and just like super time consuming. So all these eBay power sellers started using this $30 a month tool we had called ChannelAdvisor Pro. And at that point, we called it Auction Rover Pro. Then it was so whatever it was called, Pro something. And then one day, and it was all these people selling Beanie Babies, like this lady, Granny Goose out in Iowa, I remember. specifically. And, she would do $5,000 a month, which at that point was like crazy. Like, people are selling online 5,000. And to buy on eBay, it wasn't like it is today. You would actually have to like write a check, or it was before even PayPal and stuff like that.
Oh, wow. Her storage room had to be wild. But
Yeah, I'm sure she had all the bears. And then one day we saw that IBM sold like $2 million worth of ThinkPads on eBay, and we did a head explode emoji because wow, no one had sold 2 million of anything anywhere online. Well, I guess maybe Amazon like annually or something, but it was like such a weird data point that it really stuck out. And also, I don't have an MBA, but I thought, all right, $30 a month and 2 million in sales, we may not be charging enough for this. So we actually went and found that person, and they said, look, because of the dot-com bubble, we're swimming in inventory. No one's buying anything now. We're kind of in a recession. And my boss said, liquidate all this product because we've got another ThinkPad coming. And I tried 3 experiments. I sold it to a liquidator. I sold some international. And then I sold some on eBay. And eBay gave like 5x what I was getting from a liquidator. So they were selling it like 10 cents on the dollar to liquidator and 60 cents on the dollar on eBay. So I told my boss, and he said, sell it on eBay. And I did. And it pushed the price down a little bit, but it absorbed most of the demand.
were they actually paying the $30 subscription as well?
They were, yeah.
Oh, boy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he had signed up. I think he was like an individual seller. Yeah.
Okay.
But then what we found is we were like, okay, myself and a salesperson were like, let's go pitch everyone we can find. But he also gave us a lot of feedback on what he wanted the software to do. So we came out, we had Pro, and then we had Enterprise. So we put some stuff in there, made it Enterprise, and we wouldn't sell Pro to big companies. Then at the same time, around that time, the CEO of the company that acquired us called and said, hey, we're going to have to shut you guys down because we're going to focus on competing with Google. They were a search engine and they were going to compete with Google. Spoiler alert, this does not go well for them in this story. And we said, okay, but we've got this weird thing that's kind of worked. Can we spin it out? And he said, sure, but you have to buy back a little piece of this thing, and you got to get eBay to agree to fund this. It was this arbitrary thing that I don't know why. I think he didn't really want us to be successful at it. But myself and our COO went to eBay and hat in hand, and they said, you've been a good partner. Sure, we'll do that. And then they helped fund it. And so then we spun out as ChannelAdvisor with this idea of helping big companies sell on eBay. The idea, though, was, what we were already starting to see back in, this is 2001, is sure, people will sell on their website, and you want to have a website. But a lot of the activity, and this is really starting to happen in Asia at this point in time, is happening off of your website on these. At this point in time, we call them auction sites. And you're just starting to see in Asia, there was some of these marketplaces kind of forming. Mm-hmm. So, that's why we call ChannelAdvisor this idea that you would sell across all these different channels, including your website, and you would need someone to advise you on how to do that. And our software would be that advisor. So that was 2001, and that's kind of how we got to ChannelAdvisor. So we really just basically had an eBay selling tool, a Pro and an Enterprise version, and pulled those out of the company we had sold to.
Okay. Wow, that's quite the turnaround there.
Yeah, sell high, buy low. That's my advice.
And so you were, you took ChannelAdvisor public, and that must have been quite the journey.
Yeah, so I've gotten very good at raising capital. I do have a deck, and so raised 90 million venture capital, and then so we spun out in July of 2001, and then in September we had 9/11, so that was very scary. So it was kind of a black swan event, and then. My first black swan event was a dot-com bubble crash, and then this one. In the front end of ChannelAdvisor, the other thing you'll find funny is we didn't know, no one had coined software as a service. So we called it hosted software. And in the first 2 years, I would pitch VCs, and the number one reason I would get a no was, we don't believe software can be hosted, which is hilarious now because that's all they want. Number 2, we don't think e-commerce is going to be big. So there was still a lot of naysayers on that. Number 3 was the fact we were only helping people on eBay freaked out a lot of people. It felt like a single point of failure, which is true. But they thought the only auction site that's ever going to be is eBay. They didn't see the marketplace stuff coming. So the other big thing we did is one day Amazon called us, and they had tried to have a auction site like thing for a long time. And it never worked. They were on like their 4th iteration. But what had worked is they rolled out a marketplace for used books. We used to have physical books. You and I remember this.
Oh, yeah.
We used to have physical books, music videos, video games, DVDs, all this stuff, records, all this, not digital.
I went to a presentation about Amazon in summer 2003 when I was in the Columbia Publishing course. And it was just, it was early days of I can't remember if they'd already transitioned to selling other things or not, but I was just like, it's quite funny to look back on that now and just be like, wow, that was, things shifted a little bit.
Yeah, so Amazon was all what we'd call media category, physical media category. And then they called us under super NDA one day and said, "Hey, we're gonna Toys R Us was their toy category, and there used to be a toy store called Toys R Us. This does not go well for them in this story." And they basically gave them the finger and left abruptly right before the holiday season in October of like 05, 06, somewhere in there. And Amazon was in a lurch, and they said, "Well, we can take the marketplace that is used for used books and stuff, and use that for a toy category." And then they said, "Who has a bunch of these people that sell toys?" And we had them all. So they called us and said, "Hey, we're going to launch a new toy category with marketplaces, super secret." And we're like, "Great." And they're like, "And you have to have an integration done in 15, 20 days. We're like, okay. So we, I went to the board and I said, "We're going to drop everything and do this." And there was a big controversy. They're like, "Amazon's not going to succeed out of books." Turns out they were wrong. I was right. So I won the battle on that one. And we leaned in really heavy on Amazon from then forward. And that was good. So Amazon now is like orders of magnitude bigger than eBay. Amazon's success in marketplaces brought in Walmart, Target, Best Buy. Almost everyone has a marketplace now in the US. And then our success on Amazon brought us into international marketplaces. Like in Brazil, we support Mercado Libre and all the Asian, South Asian marketplaces, Korean ones, India, China, the whole Alibaba family.
Right.
Today, even like if you've used Temu or Shein, all those things have a marketplace kind of underneath it. So we went from like one marketplace for a very long time to now, today ChannelAdvisor probably supports 250 marketplaces.
Wow. Okay. I didn't realize it was quite that expensive.
Yep. So we called that trend right. It just took a lot longer than this always happens. Like you can see these trends, but a lot of times it takes longer to kind of get through adoption.
Oh, you caught the wave early. That's good looking out.
Yeah. And then the other black swan event was 08 and 09. So we were chugging, and then finally things started going our way and people got excited about SaaS. And then 08 and 09, the Great Recession happened and it fell off a cliff. So we had to cut deep and pull in whatever we could from investors. And we kind of got through that by the skin of our teeth. And on the other side of it, all our competitors were gone. Wall Street decided suddenly it loved recurring revenue businesses because Salesforce.com was one of the only companies out. And they finally got people to use the term SaaS, software as a service. And they did really well through that 08 and 09 Great Recession. So then suddenly Wall Street said, we need more of those. And so then they did this whole thing of like, who has over 40 million in revenue and is growing fast enough in an interesting category. And it was us, a company called Omniture, and that was it. And then Salesforce was already public. So we were able to get public shortly thereafter in 2013 by just kind of being in the right place at the right time. And the setup from 08 and 09 meant it had cleared the competitive field that we didn't have a lot of other people trying to go public right then.
So let's talk about the transition into Spiffy. And then also, one of the things that was interesting to me, in this first podcast here, you went really deep into the e-commerce, obviously, while you were with ChannelAdvisor. And so you've hosted for how many years now? The podcast, Jason and Scott?
I think we're at 8 or 9. We're kind of coming up on a decade, believe it or not. Yeah.
Yeah, hundreds and hundreds. And I was just like, that is a deep well of knowledge there about some e-commerce.
Yeah, that was funny. We were on this. So there used to be, so there's the National Retailer Federation, which is the big nonprofit kind of group of retailers. And then there was shop.org and it was separate. And then they kind of merged. And Jason and I were on the board of shop.org, which then became shop.org NRF, which now has digital retail or something like that. And so we would go to these board meetings, and afterwards we would chat because he's really a retail payments guy, and he's really big in the Walmart world, and I'm big in the Amazon world. And we would learn so much from each other. One time I offhandedly said, "I learned so much from this. We should like put it down on a podcast because I think other people would enjoy it." And And like literally the next day, this mic arrives at my
Oh,
office.
really?
It's like, yeah, he's an audiophile, like your audio guy. And he was like,
Okay.
I've studied all this and here's what we're going to do and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So we've been putting that out
Dove
there.
right in. Okay.
Yeah. Largely known for really deep focusing on Amazon and understanding what's going on inside of there, helping retailers and think about the strategies for dealing with all these changes that they face. We've been talking a lot about AI, as you can imagine right now. There's a lot going on in that world.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. I listened to a couple of episodes from the very beginning and hearing y'all talk about, I think you were discussing personalization and is that going to be a thing or not? Or, and it just, it was interesting to listen back a little bit. So then you're moving into, we'll go back to Spiffy. Yeah.
Yeah. So Spiffy came from on the IPO roadshow for ChannelAdvisor. I had my first Uber experience, and it wasn't even called Uber. It was called Uber Taxi. And I was in a beta because a ChannelAdvisor customer got me in the beta because he had left his business to start to be an early guy at Uber. So I was like, and this always happens to me. Everyone was like, this is the craziest idea. No one will ride with a stranger, which is funny because now they're so big. But I don't know if you remember that, like,
You're like, let me in that car. Do you have candy? I would love a mint.
yeah, no one was really into Uber in the early days and thought it would succeed.
Yeah.
But I was like, I can't wait to try this because I always felt like an idiot in New York, like standing there waving my hand and not. I can never understand what the little medallion things mean on the taxis. Like, are you working? And
Right.
then they'll roll down the window. I'll say where I'm going, and they're like, no way, and they'll just shoot off. So I'm like the hillbilly gone to New York all the time. So then I was like, press the button, a car comes, and I get in, and I was like, I'm only using this from now on. And so it was great for me. But then I started thinking, I was like, over my career, we've seen products go digital in the form of e-commerce. So, and if you look at GDP, consumer products are 1/3, consumer services are 2/3. You probably have a house, and once you have a house, you realize, gee, I'm spending all my money on broken things around my house, lawn care, this, that, and other. I've got a broken HVAC right now that's driving me crazy. I'm sure it's going to be, $2,000 or some crazy thing because everyone that comes to my house has never seen anything like it in their whole career. They never show up the right parts.
They might be able to find the part on eBay though.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking this is great. Like, what if this means we're going to see all these services get digitized or go digital? What does that mean? And I was like, well, you want every experience to be like that Uber experience where, I've got my phone, it's the remote control for my life. And I say, I need food delivered. I need a babysitter. I need a dog sitter. I need this. I need this. I need this. And I was thinking, well, what's not covered? And previously I'd invested in a couple physical car washes. And I thought that would be an interesting area to kind of, no one was really working on the car. And the car is interesting because home services are tricky because having someone in someone's home is like a whole thing, right?
Yeah.
Like a lot of these a lot of these home cleaning services get accused of stealing, all kinds of crazy stuff. But someone's car, if you're not going to be driving around a lot, it's a very valuable asset to somebody. So it's important, and it's a total pain in the butt to deal with, right? It's like no one ever got up and was excited about dealing with that stuff. So we thought, okay, this is interesting. So that was basically the formation of the experiment was, could we build something that was a totally different way to think about car care? And so we started in the Raleigh-Durham market. And the other thing we decided was, unlike Uber, where the drivers are considered contractors or 1099, same with DoorDash and all these things, they're all 1099. It doesn't really work for cars because we couldn't insure them doing anything to your car to the level we wanted to. And, it's very hard. It's a hard pitch for us to say, hey, we're going to have this whole new service offering. Here's some random person that's going to come work on your car. And we think they're vetted, but if they do a bad job, let us know and we'll kick them out. It's just like it's not really where you want to be from a service perspective. So we decided to make them our employees. And when regardless of the model, labor becomes very important in these service models. And we realized early on that we needed to get up the density of service. So the first thing we did is we started going to office parks. Well, that worked great until COVID killed that. But then we were well on our way by the time COVID came. Of also the second order thing we did was fleets, and we always wanted to get to fleets, and it took a lot to unlock them. What unlocked it for us was oil change, believe it or not.
I believe it because I'm so overdue right now.
There's all these very large fleets that need oil change. And imagine you had 100 vans and they were, and then they're all, when you lease these things, it's very important to the leaseor that they have all the maintenance done because it impacts the residual.
If it's been maintained.
So all that, so then we, the dirty secret of Spiffy, it's not really a secret, is that it's largely B2B, so it's largely fleet.
Okay, so now it is largely okay.
Yeah, it feels consumery to the consumers, and we try to, we like having both because it means we give our B2B customers a consumer level of experience, which is kind of unusual. So raised 90 million there again, and Spiffy is, call it a north of $50 million business with, mid hundreds technicians in like 30 or 40 markets.
Oh, that's more markets than I realized. Okay.
Like yeah, 50 people here kind of in the triangle.
Okay. And y'all are in Durham, correct?
Yep.
Okay. I'm in Durham as we speak. It's been quite something to see the triangle grow over these last couple of decades, man. I know that you've had a hand in an awful lot, and you'll have a hand in more. But what's it been like watching the the RTP general zone, and surrounds grow like it has?
Yeah, entrepreneurship's been good to me, and I try to give back. That my first business, Stingray, would not have been successful if I didn't have this mentor that gave very generously of my time, and I tried to pay him, or at least give him some equity, and he refused, and I committed to pay it forward like 30 years ago. The first 20 years of that was largely meeting with, trying to get more entrepreneurs in the area, supporting folks like Stefan and Daniel, and making sure that they're on the right path. Then between ChannelAdvisor and Spiffy, I realized we had solved that problem. We suddenly had thousands of startups. And the hard thing about startups is it's any company online can look like a big company. So you'd run into these companies. I was like, how big are these companies? And selfishly, I'm better at helping ones that get through this process called product market fit. Because once you're through product market fit, I can talk about how do you go from 1 to 5 million to 10 to 20, 30, 50? How do you think about international expansion? How do you build a board? How do you raise bigger rounds? That kind of thing. So I created a list to kind of help myself sort it out called and I branded this middle of the funnel. So before then we knew we had startups and successes, and we didn't know what was in the middle. So I thought we need a middle to the funnel here. And I decided to call them tweeners because I had a kid that was in that tweener phase. And then I liked the alliteration of triangle tweeners. So it's the triangle tweener list. So I published that in 2015. Fast forward 7 years, I put all this data out there, and people would come to me and say, I really want to invest in that. I want to invest in companies here. And some of them were frustrated by local investors that were spending their money in other places and things. So we started a little mini fund in 2022 that basically the tweener list is like the S&P 500, if you will, of the triangle private companies. And then the fund invest in it. So it's kind of like an index fund strategy applied to private companies.
And I understand that it's rolling so people can kind of join up.
Yeah, it's always open. So we found this platform where new people can come in. And also we found that this has been good for the area. The local VCs have gone from $5 million funds to 60, 70, $80 million. But their minimum check size, if you want to be an investor there, is like $400,000. Well, that's, you have to have a very big net worth before that's not, you shouldn't put more than 5% of your equity, your anything into startups because they're super high risk.
So with the Triangle Tweener Fund, you're looking for accredited investors, but like you're making the barrier to entry just a little bit lower so more people can participate.
Yeah, the level for accreditation is, your income is like, it's still a lot, but like 200 or 300, or you can have your net worth over $1 million, not including your main residence. But let's say you're like at $1 million, you would not want to invest $400,000 in startups. That would be wildly foolish. Do not ever do that.
Trust me, when I get there, I won't.
But we have 30K. Yeah. So our minimum check is 30K for a year. And then if you want to keep going, you can. So that it's actually in that like sub 5% for all the accredited investor folks out there. And, we think it's an interesting way to support entrepreneurship in the area. And then also, expose yourself to a different part of the world, risk reward wise, that you don't have exposure to. And because we're an index fund, every quarter we invest in 10 to 15 companies. So it has built-in portfolio diversity kind of in there. Yeah.
So let's talk just a little bit about what you have going on right now. I mean, it's March, obviously. March Madness is going to be getting underway shortly. And I know that, not everyone's into baseball. That's a joke. It's basketball. But the Triangle obviously has a lot of good basketball, so it kind of makes sense. I can envision where things came from. But with the Tweener Madness, this is a little bit of a bracket competition that I think it's going to get, the competition part starts on this week. Is that right?
Yeah, dropping soon. We've actually recorded them, but I'm sworn to secrecy.
Okay.
Yeah, the idea actually came from our podcast partner, where they're like, "Hey, we've been wanting to do this like March Madness style contest for a while, and couldn't really." They were going to, I think, put podcasters against each other or something, and they were like, "Could you do that with startups?" And I was like, "That would be a great idea." So we started working on it, and we started with we had over 30 submissions. We narrowed it down to 8, and then turns out March Madness and all those things are trademarked, so it's Tweener Madness. And then we started out with our exceptional 8, and then we'll go down to fabulous 4, and then we'll have a championship. And it's, I probably shouldn't even say this, but it's kind of Shark Tank esque. It's Shark Tank light. We don't have all the drama and silliness like the Mark Burnett.
No dramatic music. Well, maybe I shouldn't speak too soon.
Yeah, no, we don't have that. But the whole point is we want founders to watch this and learn. Okay, well, if you see me pitch, it's like there's nothing magical, right? I'm just like a dude from Aiken, and I'm just telling the story of what I'm building. And if you see these people pitch from all different demographics and categories, we think other founders will learn a ton from it, and then B, I think it will help everyone see the quality of founders we have in the Triangle and companies. Yeah. And then my co-GP, his name's Robbie Allen. He came up with the great idea that the selection committee, which is another homage to March Madness, should be local investors. So it's really fun to see the questions local investors ask. So we've got literally every local investor that you can kind of imagine kind of rallied and has supported us in this. We made the decision. So if you do the math, we needed 18 judges because there's 6. There ends up being 6 matchups, and then we wanted 3 different selection committee. Then we had to have an odd number, and we didn't want just one, so then we had to have 3. So, boom! Suddenly we needed 18 selection committee people.
Yeah, I mean, I saw on your podcast they have, you had all the introduction episodes. I listened to a few of those, and it seems like a real range of folks and range of experiences. And I listened to the selection kickoff, and I have to say I have a couple favorites right now. We'll see where they land in the seating. I didn't get to participate in the voting, but it was really interesting to see all of the different all the different categories, and so people in totally separate categories might be going head to head. And what do the contests, like, what will the competition look like? Is it pitch heavy? Are they looking at fundamentals of the books, or like what are you looking at?
Yeah, it's pitch heavy because these are so we kind of own this tweener zone where people get to $1 million and up. So we wanted to exclude companies to get a little bit earlier. Otherwise, we actually have so many that it would be full of conflicts. So we didn't want it to look like some kind of a gamed thing. And it's interesting to see them earlier because it makes you have to form an opinion more. You have like less data to go on. You, the selection person, have to basically do it based on a lack of data, which is kind of interesting. That's the hard thing about it. We did change in production. What I'll say is we ended up, the Q&A was really interesting. So the pitch is about 10 minutes. Most folks came in under that, like at 8. And then the Q&A is where you learn a lot. As an entrepreneur, that's where I learn a lot, because if I go through all my pitch and you're asking like, who's your customer? Well, I lost you in there, right? And for me, it's always on me. It's like never on the receiver of the pitch. So it's been interesting to watch that part, and it'll be interesting to watch the people that get to move forward to the Fabulous 4 to see if they're able to, how they change their pitch based on the feedback they got from the last one. But it's not like Shark Tank, Mr. Wonderful, you stink, you should quit.
Sure, yeah, it's actually more productive, constructive feedback.
Yes. None of that silly Simon Cowell kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, I love to hear that. Yeah, I was curious, like I know that it was the selection committee as a whole that kind of winnowed down the field. Is that correct?
It was myself and the other people on the Tweener Fund. We kind of, we had like a 12 hours to do it. So we had to kind of just get through there. Yeah.
So what were you looking for? I mean, we're talking about core components today. What are the things that are like the real essentials that you're like, this one's a go, this one's maybe they're going to get there soon, but aren't quite in the zone yet that we're looking for?
Yeah, even though the word triangle's in our name, we always have people outside the area, and we're pretty strict on the Wilmington is not in the triangle in our definition, kind of somewhat obviously, but we get a lot of that. And then we always say no life science companies, and several get in there. So there were some easy ones to kind of filter out based on criteria. And then it was very hard because there were a lot of high quality ones. There were some people that were so early that it was really just like nothing had been built, and it was like a napkin diagram. So we decided that would be hard to have them in with people that were a little bit further along. So we tried to get people, we kind of Goldilocks it and tried to find people that were, kind of not so early and not later, and just like right in a bit of progress. They've built something and then just need some capital to get to that next step. And that's probably what really kind of helped us winnow it down the most.
And I know that with your general investment fund, that it sounds like a focus for you is not just giving the money, but also, or you're not just investing the money rather, but also giving some feedback and support along the way. Is that something that you envision doing here after the competition wraps up, or is it do you envision relationships with some of them?
Yeah, we tried to capture the feedback, because when you're in it, sometimes you can't remember it because you're just
Yeah.
like in the moment. So we've given everyone that's in the contest, whether they moved forward or not, a lot of feedback on what the selection committee said. They'll be able to see it when it comes out. And then, yeah, so happy to help folks. Our overall mission is to support entrepreneurship in the Triangle. So we have a pretty big tent for what that means. And a lot of people think that means we can be on all their boards and be advisors and stuff. We can't commit to that level, but usually if you have a specific question, we can kind of help you get through it, or an issue you face. We can be an independent, confidential third party to help you think through it.
Okay. No, I mean, I could see that being a real service to folks who are just starting out. I mean, it was interesting to see, one of the ones that I was most excited about, it was, I think, My Matter, I believe. And because I actually face that problem. I see things in the bin and I'm just like, oh no, like that's going to ruin the whole flow. And like, so it was interesting. I was just like, okay, somebody's out there trying to solve this problem with AI. And I think he was actually saying, maybe through this process, he'll get a little bit of exposure to meet the right co-founder, somebody to partner up with. I was thinking that was interesting because I was just thinking about, the benefit of winning this, getting the funds, getting the guidance, but also just getting the exposure is probably also valuable.
Yeah, that founder's funny. John Stark's his name. He's always selling. So we actually recorded that episode at another co-working facility around here that has a studio. And on the way out, he grabbed like the managing director person and was selling them one of his devices. And I saw them. He had a tape measure out. He was like showing them where it would go and helping them envision it and stuff. So, yeah.
Never miss an opportunity. I guess that.
Yes, always be selling.
So I mean, that's one strong leaning that I'm sure it helps to have if you're an entrepreneur. Are there anything else, like what aspects of your nature, your nurture, I mean, I know that you were raised with a self-employed father who was working on software. Was that your big spur, or is there something that you've, from the time you were 3 years old, you've just had that inclination, or?
Yeah, you got to have, some people would call it work ethic. I think of it more as grit. Like this, you have to be foolishly optimistic about your idea. And your ideas are like these little soap bubbles, and everyone's trying to pop your fragile little soap bubble. So you have to have a pretty thick skin on that, almost to the point that that's what motivates you. So there's a weird kind of thing there, like a Don Quixote, like stupidly tilting at your windmill kind of thing. Then, for me as a tech founder, I did not come to selling naturally. So that was the hardest thing for me, was to kind of like, I'm a natural introvert. So to kind of like figure out the skill set for how do I sell to people? How do I convince someone to work at my company, and those types of things. So that's where I've had to spend the most personal effort. And, I say that to every founder though, is like, you'd be surprised, like every, once you get to a certain size, and I'm sure that's true for your folks, you're constantly basically selling. I don't really call it, you're persuading. So you're talking to customers, new customers, existing customers not to leave, same for employees, same for investors, same for everybody. So it's a constant, 80% time on that. I've come to enjoy it, and it's a fun challenge and a very different one than getting the computer. Getting the computer to do what you want is easy, because you just give it a program and it does it. Getting people to do what you want is a lot harder.
Yeah, getting a mass of people. So like, how did you actually go about it? How did you go about it? Like, was there a process? Was it just taking time?
Yeah, I would say there's different phases. In the early days, it was just like trial and error, and kind of finding my vibe of how I would do things and manage. And then once we sold Stingray, the company that acquired us, they immediately sent me out with their best salesperson. And I thought it was going to be a waste of time. He's the best salesperson ever. Like, I learned a ton from that guy. His name is Jim Still. He's amazing. And we were doing like $10,000 deals, and he went into Goldman Sachs and closed like a $2 million deal of our software, like days after the acquisition. And I was like, holy cow, how'd you do that? And he's like, I'll show you. And, it was just amazing how he navigated through an organization to get to the decision makers, understood, what levers to pull. And then, $2 million came out of him. Later, I found a series of books on persuasion, which is kind of like how a lot of the sales books are cheesy. They're like, do this 6 things and, spin selling, solution selling, blah, blah, blah selling. And it's okay. But I just couldn't crack the code on that until I started seeing persuasion. So there's a bunch of books on that. They're kind of the big books are from this guy, Cialdini, CIA, Ldini. We'll put him in the show notes. So he has one called Persuasion, where you can actually prime people to be persuaded, and then Influence is the second book. Yeah, those are really good.
Okay. I remember you saying that you are you find frameworks very useful and kind of models. And is there one or two that you've really relied on throughout your career, like in all the different varieties of company?
I have a lot. My meta framework, not to be confused with the company meta, but my super de-duper framework is pattern recognition, because you start to see these patterns and then you can kind of then figure out which framework to work through. I also spend a lot of time thinking about time optimization. So every year I kind of take a look at how I use my time and things like that. And there's a lot of interesting frameworks on that. I write on something called the Tweener Times. I put out some ideas on there. And one that resonated with a lot of people is this idea of being a time billionaire. So when you're in your 20s, you have 2 billion seconds left. And when you're in your 40s, 50s, you have 1 billion seconds left. Warren Buffett's one of the richest people, but he's 85 or 90, and no one would really want to change places with him. That's a good way to think about wealth and time wealth and how you spend your time. And slow down a little bit, spend time with family is always important, and those types of things. So it makes you realize time's precious. There was a point, building ChannelAdvisor was interesting. I got to 800 people and I looked around and we were all just in meetings with each other all day. And I was like, that can't be right. How do, and then everyone's doing a one-on-one. You do the math and suddenly 45 hours a week is taken up in meetings. And, so I spent a lot of time thinking about that and how do we not do that, and just stuff like that. How do I squeeze an extra, 48 minutes a day and stay super productive so that then I can bank my non-work time for fun stuff, even more fun stuff.
Yeah. You've got a family, you've got, I don't know if you got any pets, but I'm glad to hear you make time for all that.
My favorite developer frameworks, Model View Controller, hands down the best.
Okay.
Can't go wrong with an MVC.
So I was also curious, you said you were an introvert. I can very readily identify with that. I came in on the sales side, and I think the only reason that I succeeded at Syncfusion early on the sales side was I was just like, well, I feel like selling to developers, that's a crowd that I could kind of identify with, and they're looking at things logically. They do not want your fancy, big word spiel. It's just like, does it do what I want? What are the details? Let's talk about the specs. Let's talk about, everything that matters on the back end support wise, but they didn't want a lot of fluff. And so
yeah, if you have an introvert that wants to sell to other introverts, selling to developers, you will always be less introverted than developers.
Yeah. But
we're basically mushrooms. Put us in a dark closet with a little food and moisture. We're happy as clams.
but that podcasting is something quite different to that. So I wondered, how did you go about getting into that headspace or zone? Was it different from what you'd done before when you were leading a company? Or did you have any nerves as you were getting into it? Or what would you recommend for folks who are just starting out?
I think the core for me being able to do all this is I'm just naturally curious and enjoy talking about different things I don't know a lot about. And if I'm going to, I think my path to podcasting was through writing. So I did some blogging and writing and speaking at events. And if you're an introvert, I absolutely hate speaking at events. It's like a whole thing. It's like the worst thing you can do as an introvert, because now you're going to get up in front of a bunch of people and stuff.
Yeah,
I'm through it now, but so I was like, well, I kind of need to be, I need to do this thought leadership and get things out there for the company and everything. I'm generally curious. And I like long form writing, but it just is like so arduous and takes a long time. And then as ChannelAdvisor got bigger, like the bar for things I could publish went to zero because like, legal investor relations and PR, like all these teams had to see it before I could even write anything. And I was the CEO. So I was like, this is ridiculous. I'm just going to do a podcast. And I'm like, great, no rules. I'm like, okay. So if I write anything, it has to go through 80 people. But if I just hop on a mic, oh, you're good. And I was like, okay. They said, just don't say these things. So I was like, wow, this is like so much easier. So part of it was just like getting around the process, and ChannelAdvisor forced me to get into it. And, I can go do some research and basically have the ideas in my head and not have to go through. I'm also a bad writer. So when I'm writing, I'm constantly editing it because it kind of stinks so much. So I'm a little OCD on that.
I hear there's things to help you with that nowadays.
Yeah.
It's not for me so much, but I'm trying to get my mind around it.
It's a good thought part. Like it's good for brainstorming. I don't want it to write for me because then I end up just rewriting it all anyway. So that just takes a long time to write for me. And then so this is just easier. I can get my thoughts out. I can kind of and sometimes I can. It actually is a good precursor for writing stuff down because you can kind of try them out in this format and see how it lands and iterate. And it's much more fungible and easy.
Yeah. Well, I've really enjoyed listening to the variety of guests that you have, and I will definitely continue to check it out. So, is there anything do you want to talk just a little bit about, where you're going in the future with? I know that you just recently started the Tweener Talks. Is it going to be in talking with mostly folks that you are investing in through the fund, or is it going to be kind of a broad array of people from all around?
Yes, that's a new podcast, and the goal is to capture some of these founder stories in the triangle, and it has multi purposes. Number one, to make sure we get them down in time. Where some of the companies that were successful were in the '80s, and we had like a Chris Evans on, and he was the first email program with a UI was here in the triangle from some NC State grads, and so those are really good stories, and just trying to make sure we capture those and keep our culture of the triangle, but then also zipping around and showing the diversity of ideas, kind of the same thing from the March Madness, but over a longer arc of time. And then the other thing is I am working on a new stealth AI company.
I saw that on your LinkedIn profile, and I was wondering, but I didn't want to be too nosy.
So it's going to be back in e-commerce. So going back to the ChannelAdvisor days.
Okay.
So we haven't, we're going to later in March, we'll be revealing more about what we're doing there. So stay tuned.
Oh, really? Okay. So coming right up.
Yeah.
We definitely absolutely will. Maybe we'll give you another call about that. I was curious. So, one of the things I really enjoyed as I was listening to some of the podcast episodes and just getting a sense of you, I mean, even though I'd heard your name for an awful lot of years, we'd never met. And one of the things that struck me the most is your sense of humor in the podcast. I mean, you're talking about business, you're talking about, concrete things, but at the same time, there was always kind of an edge of that. And I just wanted to ask, like, who are your favorite comedians when you're growing up? Because it felt like such a common thing throughout that I just couldn't help but pick up on
it. In my generation, Robin Williams, Chris Rock, that whole, I guess he's not SNL. Mork and Mindy, remember that one?
Oh, I sure do. I lived in Boulder for a while.
Yeah, they're in Boulder, and that kind of generation of comedy.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I did think about it when I was, being like, all right, we're going to put on the headphones, first podcast, and I did think back to Stuart Smalley. Do you remember Stuart Smalley?
Yes.
on SNL?
I'm
good
smart.
enough. I'm smart
special.
enough, and doggone it, people like me. I did say that in my head just in case. But I really, it's been wonderful to talk to you. I don't want to run out your time, but I really appreciate it. Anything you want to say on the way out?
No, thanks for having me today. It's an honor to be the first guest on your podcast, and I appreciate it.
Well, hopefully we'll see you back soon, but I really appreciate you giving your input. And it's been wonderful to kind of get a sense of the breadth of your career, and just that's really about it. So.
Awesome. If folks want to find me, I'm on LinkedIn, Scot with one T, Wingo. So you can find me on there.
Alrighty, and we will put all that in the show notes. We'll drop some slides in here. And thank you again. And I hope that next meeting is productive, and we'll look forward to hearing what's next on the horizon for you, and checking out the Tweener Madness as well.
All right. Thanks. Have a good day.
You have a great one. Thank you. Bye-bye.